Last Sunday, I began speaking about the book of Hosea in Hosea chapter 1. And this week, I want to continue that series of lessons in Hosea. And if you would be opening your Bibles, we will be picking up actually this morning in Hosea chapter 1 in verse 10. And the lesson title, if I ever get to it, the lesson title looks a little ambitious, all the way down to chapter 3, verse 5. We will see if we actually accomplish that today. But in the book of Hosea, which has my notes on have somehow disappeared to the other side of my Bible. Here we go. We talked last time about the situation in Hosea. The Lord told the prophet Hosea to take a wife for himself, a wife of harlotry, a woman who is a prostitute, a woman of ill repute, who would not be faithful to him, and to love this woman anyway, and to have children of harlotry with her. That's kind of a shocking thing for the Lord to ask someone to do. And all of the stress. I don't know how many lessons I heard growing up about, when you get married, you need to make sure you marry the right person. Here we go. Here's the Lord telling Hosea, make sure you want to deliberately, intentionally marry the wrong person. The absolute worst person to have a relationship with, it seems. But that's what happens, and they have 3 children, which are given symbolic names. Jezreel, a reference to the bloodshed of the house of Jehu at Jezreel. Lo Ruhama, which means no compassion, because God says, I'm not going to have compassion on the people. And Lo Ammi, which means not my people, because as God said, you are not my people, and I am not your God. But of course, the storyline of Hosea, as we talked about, involves the name changes of these children and sort of the restoration of this harlot. And so that's really what we're looking at this morning is, not just how that apostasy has manifested itself in Israel, but how God actually brings the harlot back to himself. I showed this outline last time, although the color scheme was terrible and you couldn't read it. Now, the color scheme is better, but if you still can't read it, I'm sorry. We try the best with the technology we have available. Of course, the section we looked at last time, the literal marriage between Hosea and Gomer and their children of harlotry, it was a bad situation. That's what we looked at. But in the middle, in the B, C, and B prime sections, we have focused more on the spiritual marriage, not between Hosea and Gomer, but rather between Yahweh and Israel as a people. This isn't the only time in the Bible that God and His people and their relationship is portrayed as a kind of a marriage of sorts. We see this same idea in other prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah, and we see this in the New Testament as well whenever we talk about the relationship between Christ and the church, the congregation of believers. But what we're going to look at kind of follows this progression that, first of all, talking about the restoration of the children in chapter 1:10 through 2:1. Second, talking about the present spiritual marriage between Yahweh and Israel and how it's really bad and how the harlot will be judged, given a sort of a writ of divorce, if you will. That's in 2 verses 2 through 13. And thirdly, we'll talk about the future spiritual marriage, not just the restoration of the children, but the restoration of the harlot herself in chapter 2 and verses 14 through 23. And then, because the story with Hosea and Gomer has some loose ends, we will come at the end and look at the very, very short chapter 3 and hopefully kind of tie the whole thing up. So that's kind of the roadmap for the lesson, if you will, this morning as we go into this. And so we'll start with the restoration of the children. Chapter 1 and verse 10. God says, "Yet the number of the sons of Israel will be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And in the place where it is said to them, 'You are not my people,' it will be said to them, 'You are the sons of the living God.' And the sons of Judah and the sons of Israel will be gathered together, and they will appoint for themselves one leader, and they will go up from the land. For great will be the day of Jezreel. Say to your brothers, Ammi, and to your sisters, Ruhama." And the chapter division is unfortunate. It should have happened at chapter 1 and verse 10 or chapter 2 verse 2. But there you go. That's what happens when men are trusted to make chapter divisions. Israel is described as becoming like the sand on the sea. And any Israelite who read that expression of the sand on the sea would have immediately thought back to the promises to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in Genesis chapter 22 and verse 17, or in Genesis 32 and verse 12, where the Lord promised to make their descendants like the stars of the heaven and like the sand which is on the seashore. A group of people, a great multitude that would not be countable. And so what Hosea is doing here, he says that even though you're in this situation, even though you're in this situation of apostasy, and even though judgment is coming on you, there is still a hope of restoration. There is still hope for the promise of God. There is still hope that Israel will reach this position of innumerability and abundance. This not my people, as they are now, become sons of the living God instead. The language of lo ami, which means not my people, is reversed, and now God calls them His people. He calls them His children outright. These children of the harlot who God was saying are not mine, He's saying, no, you really are mine. And then we have, of course, the reunion. In verse 11 talks about the reunion of Israel and Judah. Kind of an interesting comment that's made here, because in 1 Kings chapter 12, they had the divided kingdom. Israel, the 10 tribes of Israel broke off and formed their own kingdom in the north and rebelled against the house of David. And the southern kingdom of Judah was a separate kingdom in the south. And then in their history, they never really joined themselves back together at any given point. Eventually, the 10 tribes were carried off into exile, and that was the end of the story, although there's numerous speculations throughout history as to what happens to the 10 tribes from there. But here, even though 1 Kings talks about the divided kingdom as a rebellion against the house of David, Israel is seen here. It says that the sons of Judah and the sons of Israel will be gathered together, and they will appoint for themselves one leader. One leader. And then they will have a great day in Jezreel, the place where a kingdom was once attained by bloodshed at Jezreel becomes a place of a great day. And then, of course, verse 1 of chapter 2, which continues this idea of restoration, talks about the name changes specifically, Ammi and Ruhamah, which mean my people and compassion. And then what this is the reason it goes with what comes before is because, like everything that comes before, it is a positive reversal of the children's names. Instead of Lo Ammi and Lo Ruhamah, they are Ammi and Ruhamah. And now what we're looking at, that's kind of the end of the story, if you will. The goal that God has for His people. And the one that He speaks about in the New Testament as well. Like, for instance, in 1 Peter chapter 2, which we looked at last time. In 1 Peter 2, in verse 9 and 10, says that you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of Him who called you out of darkness into His marvelous light. For you once were not a people, but now you are the people of God. You had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Ammi and Ruhamah. Now, this is the end of the story. But that's not where Israel is right now. And this is the problem. Verses 2 through 13 talk about the real issue that we need to look at. This present spiritual harlotry. Contend with your mother. Contend. For she is not my wife, and I am not her husband. And let her put away her harlotry from her face, and her adultery from between her breasts. Or I will strip her naked and expose her, as on the day when she was born. I will also make her like a wilderness, make her like desert land, and slay her with thirst. Also I will have no compassion on her children, because they are children of harlotry. For their mother has played the harlot. She who conceived them has acted shamefully. She said, I will go after my lovers, who gave me my bread and my water, my wool and my flax, my oil and my drink. Therefore, behold, I will hedge up her way with thorns, and I will build a wall against her, so that she cannot find her paths. She will pursue her lovers, but she will not overtake them. She will seek them, but she will not find them. Then she will say, I will go back to my first husband, for it was better for me then than now. she does not know that it was I who gave her the grain, the new wine, and the oil, and lavished on her silver and gold, which they used for Baal. Therefore I will take back my grain at harvest time, and my new wine in its season. I will also take away my wool and my flax, given to cover her nakedness. And then I will uncover her lewdness in the sight of her lovers, and no one will rescue her out of my hand. I will also put an end to all her gaiety, her feasts, her new moons, and her Sabbaths, and all her festal assemblies. I will destroy her vines and fig trees, of which she said, "These are my wages, which my lovers have given me." And I will make them a forest, and the beasts of the field will devour them. I will punish her for the days of the Baals, when she used to offer sacrifices to them, and adorn herself with the earrings and jewelry, and follow her lovers, so that she forgot me, declares the Lord. Now, there's a lot here we could talk about, certainly. The opening line, of course, in verse 2, contend with your mother, contend. This is language we'll see later in Hosea as well, but it's a technical term that usually meaning to enact a lawsuit against someone. It can mean to have an argument or quarrel or controversy, but it can also refer to bringing a case or a lawsuit against somebody, and in fact does definitely have that meaning later in Hosea chapter 4. When it says, contend with your mother, for she is not my wife and I am not her husband. Some people read that and they suggest that that's kind of an official divorce formula. I'm not exactly sure, but it would fit with other things we find in the Scripture. God giving Israel a certificate of divorce and sending her away. She's cheated on him one time too many, and now he's washing his hands of the affair and is done with this. The children, in verse 2, are called to dispute with their own mother over her behavior. Kind of a shocking idea. Usually in a divorce proceeding today, there's a big argument about who gets the kids, but here it's the kids who are involved in the prosecution against their mother and against her harlotries. The verses 3 and 4 describe nakedness and desolation and use some rather shocking and graphic language, which I'm sure perhaps somebody who's too sensitive will get offended by that's being read in church. But this is in the Bible. This is the prophet proclaiming the message here. He says, look, you have a choice. You can either put away your harlot's clothes willingly, or I'm going to rip them off of you myself. She doesn't put her harlot's clothes away willingly. They will be forcibly removed. And then she will have nakedness. Then she will have shame. Then she will have exposure. This idea of using nakedness as a form of judgment and condemnation is very common in the prophets. Isaiah chapter 20 describes how the prophet Isaiah walked around naked for 3 years to symbolize what would happen to the Philistines who were carried into exile. Ezekiel chapter 16 uses similar language to describe what's happened, how God finds this child wallowing in its own blood, naked in childbirth, and then He clothes her, He raises her up, He brings her up to basically makes her healthy and makes her rich and makes her plentiful. And what she does, of course, is she goes out into the streets and she starts playing the harlot. I don't know what causes that, but I'm going to put this down here and see if it doesn't interfere. She goes out on the streets and she starts playing